What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. By the time you guys are watching this video, we are going to have just passed the 2024 NFL Combine. So rookie talk is going to be in full swing. And so what we're doing today is we're going to be doing a 2024 rookie mock draft with landing spots, Superflex tight end premium, of course. But with that being said, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about our first prospect. So if you guys are curious about looking at the mock draft and seeing where the landing spots came from, I am going to be linking the mock draft down in the description. And full disclosure here, this is a 2-round mock draft that we are using. There was 22 fantasy relevant players drafted in the first 2 rounds, so we didn't have enough to do a full 24 for a 12-man league. So I've just modified this. We'll do it as a 10-man league mock draft today. So we'll talk about 20 of these players, but it's still going to be good nonetheless. And so with that little bit of context out of the way, let's hop right into the 101. Who I selected as Caleb Williams for the Chicago Bears, and he was drafted round 1, pick 1 in this mock draft. It's not really a surprise to anybody. This is a move on from Justin Fields. We all have expected this to happen, whether it happens now or whether it happens in the next coming days. I am recording this a few days before it comes out, so Justin Fields could even be traded by the time that this video drops, and the fit in Chicago is going to be fine. They have a good defense there in Chicago, some decent weapons in DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and maybe even an additional weapon that they're going to be adding later in this mock draft. The hope with Caleb Williams is that this experiment pans out just a little bit better than the Justin Fields experiment has happened to be in Chicago, which I do think is going to be the case. To me, this is a Pro Bowl level of prospect in Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be fantastic, and he lands here 101 in our mock draft to the Chicago Bears. Now moving on to the 102, that is where we are going to be selecting Marvin Harrison Jr., who does get drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. He goes round 1, pick 4 in this mock draft, and Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Arizona Cardinals is probably the perfect fit for a player like this. He is as good as it gets in this wide receiver class. You pair him with Kyler Murray for the foreseeable future, and that is probably a stack that we will all probably be craving to have on our Dynasty Fantasy Football rosters. And going to Arizona means that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a ton of opportunity right away. You look at what they have this year as free agents. Greg Dortch and Hollywood Brown are both free agents for this wide receiver room. That was about 27% of their targets during the 2023 season. Marvin Harrison would have the opportunity day one, as soon as he steps in the building, to take those 27% of the targets that they are leaving behind. And I think he would be valued as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. The second the Arizona Cardinals submit that pick and walk it up to the podium, Marvin will be a top 5 wide receiver in your Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues. So that is everything we want out of a rookie pick, and that's why we're taking him 102 here in this draft. Up next at the 103, that is where we are going to be taking Drake Maye, who was drafted by the Washington Commanders in this mock draft at the 2nd overall pick. This would be ideal for Washington Commanders fans. This is a team that had the most passing attempts of any team in the NFL last year, and they really didn't have a lot to show for it, obviously, because they're still picking here number 2 in the NFL draft. New head coach there in Dan Quinn, obviously a new offensive coordinator as well in Cliff Kingsbury. I think those two plus Drake Maye, this gives the Washington Commanders a lot of hope for their future. You obviously pair him with Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and some other assets there in Washington. And I think after this selection, the only question that should still remain in Washington is what are we going to do with Sam Howell? Obviously, Drake Maye is taking over for Sam Howell as the next quarterback of the Commanders. He did the same thing for him there in North Carolina, but I can't imagine that you would have a quarterback who does have some perceived value in the NFL just sitting on your bench if somebody's willing to give you something for him. So he may be on the move if the Washington Commanders select Drake Maye. And now at the 104 here in our rookie draft, we are going to be selecting Jayden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU, who did go to the New England Patriots with the 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft. And I like Jayden Daniels as a prospect. I think he has a lot of tools that we want to see out of especially fantasy football quarterbacks. Obviously, he has the rushing upside that we see in these types of quarterbacks that do bring a lot of value to your fantasy football teams. But this New England Patriots landing spot feels like the worst case scenario for pretty much any fantasy relevant prospect in this year's class. It just seems like the New England Patriots are lacking pretty much everything on this roster. They just don't have the infrastructure in place to support really any fantasy football asset. So I do think in real life, I would love to see the New England Patriots trade back, probably gain some extra draft capital, and just build a roster that can support a future rookie quarterback in the future. I don't think that they have that today, but that is where he is picked in this mock draft. So I do think that that is going to separate Drake Maye, and Jayden Daniels for me, who are being valued pretty similarly in these rookie drafts. But that is why we went Drake Maye over Jayden Daniels, just because the landing spot here doesn't feel like it is entirely set up for Jayden Daniels to succeed. But top 3 draft capital in the NFL draft nonetheless. You can't really push him too much further down your boards, especially in your super flex leagues. Now up next at the 105, we are going to be selecting Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington. And I do think that most people would be selecting Malik Nabers in a bubble at this draft selection. That does seem like most people's consensus top 5. But Rome Odunze drafted number 9 overall by the Chicago Bears. I just liked his draft landing spot more than I liked Malik Nabers. And I do think that both of these prospects are very talented prospects. They're very close in my rankings right now. And so I do think that a landing spot could provide a bump to one or the other in either direction. Like I said, going to the Chicago Bears, Odunze would get to pair up with Caleb Williams, who was drafted number 1 by the Chicago Bears. He gets to go into an offense that has DJ Moore and Cole Kmet alongside of him. Obviously, Odunze stepping in as the wide receiver 2 on day 1, replacing Darnell Mooney, who is a free agent, leaving behind about 13% of vacated opportunities in that wide receiver room. I think Odunze would almost immediately take those 13% that Mooney is leaving behind, and then I do think he would be able to eat into a target share of Cole Kmet and take a little bit away from him as well. That is just how talented Rome Odunze is. But obviously going to the Chicago Bears, pairing with Caleb Williams for the foreseeable future, at least the next 4 years while they are both on rookie contracts, that does add a lot of value to Rome Odunze, and the reason why I take him 105 here in this rookie mock. Now moving on to the 106, that is where we drafted Brock Bowers, who did go number 5 overall to the Los Angeles Chargers. Keep in mind, this is a tight end premium league. I do not expect Brock Bowers to go any lower than the 106 or the 107 in those tight end premium drafts, and seeing him getting mocked here to the Chargers does seem like it is a pretty popular pick amongst mock drafts here that we've been seeing lately. I think Brock Bowers going here would play with Jim Harbaugh, obviously, in the new Harbaugh offense there in Los Angeles. He probably would step in as the number 2 receiving option right away because we think that Mike Williams is going to end up being a cap casualty here. They are owing him a lot of money, and they can get a lot of money back if they cut him this offseason. And then obviously we have the age of Keenan Allen that is becoming a little bit of an issue for the Chargers. They are going to have a contingency plan for Keenan Allen here very soon, and Brock Bowers could be that contingency plan here in the receiving game. I think this pairing on the Chargers is going to be electric. We obviously love what Justin Herbert is as a quarterback at this level, and I think being that receiver for Justin Herbert here for the Chargers is going to bump Brock Bowers up draft boards, and I do think this type of draft capital is in the range of outcomes for Brock Bowers in your tight end premium drafts. Now next up, it is going to be the 107 where we are drafting Malik Nabers. We haven't said his name yet. I'm sure a lot of people are very upset that we haven't said his name yet, but he goes number 6 overall to the New York Giants. And what that means is the Giants are choosing to stick with Daniel Jones, who they did pay a lot of money just an offseason ago to be their quarterback. Nabers is obviously going to be the number 1 wide receiver for Daniel Jones, but I do think that Nabers, who does profile a little bit more like a big slot, would excel from having a true X type of wide receiver next to him in his offense. The Giants don't have that, so they would be asking Malik Nabers to play that type of position a little bit more often than they probably should. I just don't love the situation for Nabers. I obviously love the talent of Malik Nabers, but he would be going into a very bad offense who was 30th overall in the NFL in points per game last year, and they were 31st in passing yards last year. So yes, Malik Nabers is going to fall into a lot of opportunity right away, but the quality of the opportunity is going to be pretty poor for Malik Nabers here in New York. Now moving on to the 108 in our rookie draft, we are going to be selecting JJ McCarthy, who was drafted by the Denver Broncos with the 12th overall pick in this draft. This obviously shows us that the time that Russell Wilson has spent in Denver has come to an end. They are moving on to the next chapter here in Denver, and that chapter is going to be JJ McCarthy being coached by Sean Payton. And in all honesty, Denver could probably use another weapon or two just to help support JJ McCarthy. I don't know if the best situation for JJ is to be a day 1 starter. I think he could benefit from a little bit of time learning the ropes as a professional first, but this type of draft capital tells us the story of what the Denver Broncos want JJ McCarthy to be for their franchise moving forward. And when you have a quarterback drafted in the top 12 of the NFL draft in a super flex league, we have to adjust to that. and that means that we should be taking JJ McCarthy around this 108 range in our rookie mocks, and that's why we did it here today. Now, keeping it moving to the 109, this is where we select Bo Nix, who was drafted by the Raiders with the 13th pick in the NFL draft. And honestly, I do not believe that Bo Nix should be going this high in the NFL draft. I really wouldn't feel comfortable taking him this high in my super flex drafts, but I do think that this is probably where he should be going if he gets this type of draft capital. Like I said with JJ McCarthy, when you have a quarterback drafted this high in the NFL draft, we have to adjust despite how we feel about the prospect. Now, Antonio Pierce led this team. He really rallied them down the stretch last year, obviously finishing with an 8-9 record. I think in hindsight, they probably would like to be picking a little bit earlier rather than winning a couple of those meaningless games. That way they wouldn't be drafting QB5 off the board here in this draft, maybe drafting a little bit earlier. But what we know about Bo Nix is he is a very accurate quarterback, especially in the middle of the field. And I do think that Bo Nix would do a fine job distributing the football to guys like Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. Those are the type of receiving options that he would have. And I do think he would do a fine job distributing it to those guys. You could maybe argue that we would like to see them add another weapon as well. Obviously, we always want to see them add other weapons. That's just us being greedy as fantasy football players. But like I mentioned, I don't think Bo Nix is as talented as some of the other prospects in this range, but where he was drafted and the position scarcity at the position in your Superflex leagues for those quarterbacks does bump him a little bit up towards the top of this tier. That's probably why we're going to be taking him here at the 109, but I wouldn't blame anybody else if they passed on him for a different type of player. And now moving on to the final pick in our first round here. Keep in mind, we are doing 10 team just because there wasn't enough players in this 2-round mock, but we are going to be selecting at the 110, Brian Thomas Jr., who was drafted by the Buffalo Bills round 1, pick 28. And I love this landing spot for Brian Thomas Jr. This is almost as good of a fit as you could possibly imagine. Gabe Davis, obviously an unrestricted free agent for the Buffalo Bills. He is leaving this offense, or expected to be leaving this offense here this offseason. I do think that them drafting Brian Thomas Jr. does show that he did probably leave. And what Gabe Davis is leaving behind is about 20% of the vacated targets in this offense this offseason. And I think Brian Thomas could plug in pretty seamlessly to what Gabe Davis was in this offense. Both of those players, Brian Thomas especially, is an elite deep threat that is good downfield, and that would pair so perfectly with Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, and obviously the big arm of Josh Allen. And it would also give Brian Thomas the ability to develop at his own pace. I do think that Brian Thomas has some of the tools to develop into an even better wide receiver at the NFL level than he was in college, but being able to plug him in this Buffalo offense where he wouldn't be needed to do that day one, and he could just focus on doing what he does best, which is being an elite deep threat downfield, I think that would really help Brian Thomas, and it would really get me excited for him as a prospect here in my Dynasty rookie draft. Now, as we head into the second round of this mock draft, coming off of the board here at the 201, that is where we had Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington, come off the board. He went round 2, pick 42 to the Minnesota Vikings, and I love this fit for Michael Penix. Really, I like the Minnesota Vikings landing spot for any of these rookie quarterbacks because you would be plugging in a quarterback that would be able to build around the pieces of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and a pretty decent offensive line, especially at those tackle positions. But it does give me confidence in Michael Penix, and I think I would be taking him very early in my second round. And I do think that some people could argue him being a late first round pick, even over guys like Bo Nix that we drafted earlier in this mock. Now, keeping it moving to our 202, that is where we are going to be drafting Jonathon Brooks, running back out of Texas. He goes to the Dallas Cowboys. Round 2, pick 56 is the draft capital. We know he tore the ACL. We know he's recovering from the ACL, but this tells me that they think that Jonathon Brooks can be the running back one there in Dallas. Obviously, they didn't get what they wanted out of Tony Pollard this year. They're probably going to be letting him go in free agency this offseason. Jonathon Brooks, even though he may not be ready week 1, would be able to plug into this Dallas Cowboys offense, and I think he could do everything that they need out of him as the running back one. He has 3-down potential, good in the receiving game, good between the tackles, good outside of the tackles. He does it all as a running back. A lot of people's running back one in this class, and I think if you got this type of draft capital and the landing spot for Jonathon Brooks, I think that backs all of those statements that we've heard, and that's why we would take him here at the 202 in this rookie mock. Now moving on to our next player at the 203, that is where we are going to be selecting Troy Franklin out of Oregon, who gets drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers. He was selected round 2, pick 37, so very early in the second round. And we talked about the age of Keenan Allen. We talked about the potential cap casualty of Mike Williams. You add Troy Franklin here, put him alongside Brock Bowers. He is very, very quick, a good route runner, another guy who could beat you deep. I think the pairing with Justin Herbert would be very good. And I think that would be the backup plan to Keenan Allen as he continues to age. Troy Franklin, Brock Bowers, Justin Herbert. Sounds like an awesome pairing for the foreseeable future. Sign me up for Troy Franklin here at the 203. And it feels like it is such a value getting Troy Franklin at the 203. And now at the 204, we are going to be selecting Blake Corum out of Michigan. He goes round 2, pick 59 to the Houston Texans. And talk about a team that needs a running back. Devin Singletary is a free agent, a team that has a good offensive line. You put Blake Corum here in Houston with CJ Stroud, with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, all of those guys. I think you are going to be very excited about the touchdown opportunities that Blake Corum is going to get. We obviously saw him score a ton of touchdowns in Michigan. I think that would continue at the NFL level. And I think some people might even argue that Blake Corum here in the second round to Houston could be argued even higher in this mock draft, especially with some of the scarcity and some of the question marks of the running backs here in this class. Blake Corum to the Houston Texans would be awesome. And that's why we select him here at the 204. And now on to the 205 is where we are going to be selecting Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. And I'll be honest, guys, he goes round 1, pick 32 to the Kansas City Chiefs. There's going to be a lot of people telling me, dude, you are way too low on Keon Coleman. I know, I've heard it. I don't want to be that guy, but it does seem like I am much lower on Keon Coleman than the consensus. I just don't like what he put on tape there in Florida. And I've heard some of the issues about them saying that could be a scheming kind of problem that they had there at Florida State. I don't know if that's true. And I don't necessarily think that Keon Coleman is the most robust route runner either. I do hear the argument though, you put him with Patrick Mahomes in the first round, they're going to use him. They're going to find a way to use him. But I also think we've heard that story before in Sky Moore. And I'm not saying Keon Coleman would be Sky Moore, but I will say buyers beware. I do like the fit for Keon Coleman, and this is where the value does kind of fit for me here in this draft. I just don't love the prospect profile of Keon Coleman, but that's why I take him here at the 205, and I definitely would hear your arguments in the comments if you think I'm too low on Keon Coleman. Now with our next pick in this draft at the 206, we are going to be selecting Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. He goes round 2, pick 33 to the Carolina Panthers, and Adonai Mitchell is getting so much buzz on the internet right now. Obviously, everybody on your Twitter feed, everybody in your YouTube subscription box, everybody is talking about Adonai Mitchell. He is getting comparisons to CeeDee Lamb. And even though I see a little bit of those playstyle comparisons being true, I don't know if we can necessarily use the buzzword of CeeDee Lamb and Adonai Mitchell to boost him up draft boards right now. I think he's a hell of a player. He is exactly what Bryce Young needs in this Carolina Panthers offense. They need a player like Adonai Mitchell. And I do think this is a good value on a player this talented being drafted here at the 206. And it'll all come down to how Bryce Young develops as a passer at the next level to see the actual fantasy ceiling of Adonai Mitchell here in Carolina. Now at the 207, that is where we're going to be selecting Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. And no, not the next Cooper Kupp, even though people are saying the next Cooper Kupp. I think those ceilings are a little bit too high for Ladd McConkey, but I love what he does put on tape. He is an excellent route runner. You put him here in Atlanta after being selected round 2, pick 43. This is a guy who obviously is going to be a part of the offense. You look at the depth chart for the Atlanta Falcons right now in their wide receiver room. Drake London is really the only guy of relevance. Ladd McConkey would be able to complement a receiver like Drake London, and I think he would do fantastic things, assuming they find the right quarterback upgrade this offseason. You've heard rumors of Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, everybody in between, but let's see who that quarterback upgrade is. And I do like the fit of Ladd McConkey here in Atlanta, where he would get the luxury of staying in Georgia after playing there during college. And moving on to the 208 here, that is where we're going to be selecting tight end Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. And it feels criminal that we're going to be getting a tight end this good this late in the second round of those 10-team super flex leagues. Sanders was drafted round 2, pick 49 by the Cincinnati Bengals, and I love everything about this prospect. I think he has the athletic profile that we look for in fantasy relevant tight ends, but this is also just a testament of how good this class is and how deep this class is, especially at that wide receiver and that quarterback position. Clearly, the Irv Smith Jr. experiment didn't work out here in Cincinnati, and they could very well be looking at their next tight end of the future, a position that they've been looking to try and get some production out of for many years now. I think Ja'Tavion Sanders would be an awesome fit, and pairing him with Joe Burrow for the foreseeable future does mean good things, especially in your tight end premium leagues. And moving on to the 209, that is where Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the Texas Longhorns, comes off the board. He goes to the Indianapolis Colts. Round 2, pick 46 is the draft capital. And this type of fit for Worthy feels decent. It's not bad. It's not great. I think he would complement a wide receiver like Michael Pittman pretty well. Xavier Worthy is a very, very quick, very fast type of deep threat wide receiver. I think he would profile kind of as a replacement potentially for Alec Pierce. But you put him on this offense here with Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs. I do like the fit. I just don't know if there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Xavier Worthy day one, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be selecting him. I just think that there are better wide receivers that we took ahead of him who got some better landing spots, and that's what's going to break up this tier of wide receivers for you. But Xavier Worthy is still a good player nonetheless, and the fit here in Indianapolis is pretty decent and worthy of a second round selection. And now the final pick in our mock draft today, it is going to be at the 210, Xavier Legette. He goes to the Tennessee Titans after playing in South Carolina during college, comes off the board round 2, pick 38 in this NFL mock draft. He would be going to Tennessee where he would be playing for Brian Callahan, obviously coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. They are going to be looking for new wide receiver options in Tennessee to help build around Will Levis. DeAndre Hopkins was fine in 2023. The Treylon Burks experiment hasn't been great, and Chigakonkwo was pretty irrelevant in 2023 as well. They are looking for the next best guy in this offense. I think Xavier Legette would have the opportunity to step into this offense and take a massive target share right away, especially if the Tennessee Titans decide to move on from DeAndre Hopkins this offseason, like we've seen some rumors of. And Xavier Legette is a very good contested catch wide receiver, a guy who is very good deep. I think he would pair pretty well with Will Levis, and I think he would actually help out Will Levis, especially because of how good he is at that contested catch. Now, that is all we had for you guys today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know what you guys don't like and what you like about our mock draft in the comments below. Happy to entertain conversations of either side of that argument. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed. Make sure you're hitting the notification bell. That way you guys never miss a future upload when that does come out. And last but not least, make sure you are a member of our Discord. We have a free Discord linked in the description. We are in there talking Dynasty Fantasy Football, helping you guys with rookie drafts, trades, waivers, roster strategy, all of those things in between in that Discord. So like I said, free to join. Go join that. There is no risk in doing so. And with all of that out of the way, I will see you guys on our next video. But until then, peace out.